My mother handed me a plate of collard greens with one hand and my eviction notice with the other. She didn't call it that. She called it family helping family. I call it the moment I stopped being anybody's fool. If you've ever sat at a table full of people who share your blood, but not your back, you already know where this is going. Stay with me. It gets worse before it gets better. My name is Deja Carter, and this is how I found out exactly what I was worth to the people who raised me. Before we continue, please hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. Now, let's continue. The turkey was still steaming when my mother tapped her wine glass with a butter knife like she was about to give a toast. Vanessa Carter never needed an audience's permission to speak. She just took the floor, the way she'd been taking it my whole life. "Now that everybody's here," she said, eyes sweeping the table, landing on me last, "I want to get something settled before dessert." My brother Terrence sat up straighter. His wife, Brianna, pressed a hand to her stomach in a way that felt rehearsed. "Terrence and Brianna are moving in with you next week," Mom said, smiling like she was announcing a wedding date, not a home invasion. "They lost the apartment. She's pregnant, Deja. They need stability. You've got that little place all to yourself. It's time you did something for this family for once." The room went quiet except for my father's fork scraping his plate. He didn't look up. He never did. "Start packing your things," Mom added, like she was reminding me to take out the trash. "You can stay with your Aunt Pam until they're back on their feet." I laughed. Actual laughter, sharp and disbelieving, because for 1 second I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. "Mom, you can't just—" I started. "I'm not asking, Deja," she said, and the sweetness dropped clean out of her voice. "This is what family does." 32 years old, and I was being told to vacate a home they didn't even know the real address of. What none of them knew, what I hadn't told a single soul at that table, was that I hadn't lived in that little place in 8 months. I had something else, something they had no idea existed. And that Thanksgiving dinner was about to become the last meal I ever ate as the family doormat. To understand why I sat there and swallowed my rage instead of screaming, you have to understand the Carter house rules. Rules nobody wrote down, but everybody followed like scripture. Terrence was the boy, the first grandson on both sides, the one Grandma Odessa used to say, came out already knowing how to smile his way into a room. I came out 14 months later, and from what I can tell, I came out already knowing how to disappear into one. Every report card I brought home got a nod. Every one of his got a celebration dinner. When I made honor roll at Berry Academy for 3 straight years, Mom said, "That's good, baby. Now go help Terrence with his project." When he got suspended in 10th grade for fighting, she told the school it was a misunderstanding and bought him a PlayStation that same weekend. I used to think it was just birth order. Then I turned 24, and I learned it was something colder. I'd applied for an apartment and gotten denied. My credit was wrecked, not from anything I'd done. My mother had taken out a $12,000 personal loan in my name 3 years earlier, co-signed with a forged signature, to buy Terrence a Dodge Charger after he wrecked his first car. I found out from a collections letter, not from her. When I confronted her, she didn't apologize. She said, "You had the credit, he needed the car, you'll be fine." I spent the next 3 years paying off a debt for a car I never rode in, working weekend shifts at the hospital on top of my full-time job as a physical therapist, just to climb back out of the hole she put me in. That was the day I stopped telling my family anything that mattered, and it was the day I started building something they'd never get their hands on. Nobody builds a house out of spite, but spite is a hell of a motivator when it's dressed up as ambition. After the loan, I opened a separate account at a credit union Mom didn't know existed and started dropping every extra dollar into it. Overtime shifts, per diem weekend work at a rehab facility in Pineville, birthday money I used to hand straight to Terrence for gas. I drove a 2011 Corolla with a cracked bumper for 6 years while my coworkers leased new cars. Nobody asks a woman driving a beat-up Corolla if she's hiding money. That was the point. In the spring of 2021, I found a half-acre lot out in Steel Creek on the southwest side of Charlotte for $42,000. I paid cash. I told my family I was saving up for a car. I found a contractor named Leon Whitfield through a coworker, a quiet, exacting man in his 40s who'd built half the new construction in that end of the city. When I told him I needed the whole project kept off the radar, no signs in the yard, no permits mailed to my parents' address, he just nodded like he'd heard that request 100 times before. "Family trouble?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. The build took 14 months and cost $268,000, financed through a construction loan I paid down aggressively with every shift I picked up. 4 bedrooms, a porch big enough for 2 rocking chairs, a kitchen with the kind of counter space I used to dream about while washing dishes in my mother's cramped galley kitchen as a kid. I moved in quietly on a Tuesday in March, hauling my own boxes because I didn't trust anyone to help without asking questions. I kept paying rent on a $900 studio across town, my official address, just so nobody would come looking. For 8 months, I lived a double life. And it worked, right up until the moment my mother tried to hand my double life away to somebody else. Here's what nobody at that Thanksgiving table knew. Terrence and Brianna hadn't just lost their apartment. They'd been evicted. I found that out 2 days later from my cousin Renee, who worked the front desk at the same leasing office. She wasn't trying to gossip, she just assumed I already knew, since I was supposedly about to inherit the problem. "Girl, they were 3 months behind," Renee said over the phone, lowering her voice like the walls might report her. "Sheriff posted the notice on the door and everything. Miss Brianna was out here crying, saying it was Terrence's fault for investing their rent money." Investing, that word sat wrong in my chest. I called Keisha, my best friend since nursing school, who worked in the billing department at my hospital and had a nose for numbers that didn't add up. I laid it all out, the eviction, the sudden pregnancy announcement, the timing of it all landing exactly 1 week before Thanksgiving. "Something about this smells like a setup," Keisha said. "You said Brianna announced it at the table? In front of everybody?" "That's not how people who are actually scared tell family they're pregnant. That's how people build a defense." I didn't want to believe my sister-in-law would fake something like that, but I also remembered the way she'd pressed her hand to her stomach, theatrical, timed, aimed directly at my mother instead of at Terrence. Meanwhile, my phone had not stopped buzzing since Thursday. Mom, twice. Terrence, once. With a text that just said, "Thanks for doing this for us, sis. Means a lot." He wasn't asking. He was already thanking me for something I hadn't agreed to. I sat in my empty living room, a room they didn't know existed, and realized the studio apartment cover story I'd built to protect my privacy was about to become the very thing my family used to try to take my home. Except it wasn't my home. Not anymore. And they had no idea how far behind they already were. By Sunday, Mom had stopped asking and started scheduling. "Leon from church has a truck," she said over the phone, like I'd already agreed. "He can help Terrence move Saturday. You'll need to be out by Friday so we can get the place cleaned before they bring the baby furniture." Mom, I never said yes. Deja, her voice dropped into that register she used when she wanted a conversation over before it started. "You don't have kids. You don't have a husband. What exactly are you using all that space for? Family comes first. You'll understand that when you're not so selfish." Selfish. For not handing over a home I built with my own hands and 8 years of double shifts. I called my father that night, hoping, stupidly, the way I always did, that he'd say something different. He sighed into the phone the way he always did before disappointing me. "Your mother's got her mind made up, Deja," he said. "Easier for everybody if you just go along." Easier for everybody except me. That had been the family motto my entire life, just never said out loud until now. I stayed reasonable. I want that on the record, because I know how these stories get told after the fact. The villain always claims the other person started it. I offered to help Terrence and Brianna find an apartment. I offered to co-sign, cautiously, with strict terms. I offered money toward a deposit somewhere new. Every offer got the same response from my mother. That's not the point. You have space. Use it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday, when Mom called and said the sentence I will never forget as long as I live. You know, Deja, sometimes I wonder if you're even really a Carter, the way you hold on to things instead of taking care of your own blood. I sat with that sentence for a long time after I hung up. 29 years of birthdays, of showing up, of paying off a debt I never asked for, erased by one line, because I wouldn't hand a stranger's landlord problem the keys to a life I built alone. That was the night I stopped being reasonable and started being strategic. My mother has a sister, Pam Jenkins, who raised 3 kids as a single mother and doesn't have the patience for family theater. I went to her house that Wednesday night with a bottle of wine and the whole ugly story. Aunt Pam listened without interrupting, which is rare for a woman I've never once seen let a silence sit longer than 4 seconds. "Baby, let me tell you something about your mother," she finally said. "Vanessa's been picking that boy over you since he was in diapers, and I used to think it'd stop once y'all grew up. It didn't. It just got more expensive." Then she told me something that reframed the whole Thanksgiving ambush. Terrence hadn't just fallen behind on rent. He'd sunk almost $11,000 into a cryptocurrency scheme a coworker talked him into, promising to triple it in 3 months. When it collapsed, he didn't tell Brianna the full truth. He told her it was a rough patch at work. Brianna, according to Pam, had found out the real reason only after the eviction notice went up, and instead of leaving, she'd apparently decided the fastest way to recover was to lean hard on Vanessa's favoritism and let it work in her favor. "And the pregnancy?" I asked. Aunt Pam raised an eyebrow. "Ask her yourself." But I sat next to that girl at Thanksgiving, and she had 2 glasses of wine before dessert. I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite triumph, more like clarity, cold and clean. I wasn't dealing with a family in crisis asking for help. I was dealing with people who'd made bad decisions and were counting on my mother's favoritism to bail them out at my expense. "You gonna let them walk all over you?" Pam asked. "No," I said. "I'm going to let them walk into exactly what they think they're taking, and then I'm going to show them what it actually is." For the first time since Thanksgiving, I smiled. Friday, the day Mom had decided was my deadline, my old landlord called me in a panic. "Miss Carter, there's a man and woman here with a truck, saying they're moving into your unit. They've got a key. I need you to confirm this is authorized before I let them go further." My stomach dropped and then hardened, both at once. I found out later that my mother, who'd apparently kept a spare key from a visit 2 years earlier, just in case, had given it to Terrence without asking me, telling him the address was mine to hand over. They hadn't waited for my answer. They'd simply decided the answer for me. "No," I told my old landlord, my voice steadier than I felt. "That is not authorized. Please do not let them enter." By the time I got there, Terrence and Brianna were standing in the hallway with 2 duffel bags and a crib box, arguing with the building manager. Brianna's face went tight when she saw me. "Deja, thank God," she said, reaching for sympathy like it was a light switch. "Can you just tell him it's okay? We don't have anywhere else to go." "You don't have anywhere else to go," I said, "because you never asked me if this was okay. You assumed, Mom assumed, everybody assumed, except the one person whose name is actually on anything." Terrence's jaw tightened. "Come on, Dej. Don't make this a whole thing." "I'm not making it a thing," I said. You brought a crib to an apartment you've never even seen the inside of, based on a key our mother had no right to give you. The building manager, a middle-aged man named Frank, who clearly wanted no part of this, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, sir, I'm going to need everyone to leave the hallway." I watched my brother's face cycle through embarrassment, then anger, then something that almost looked like guilt, before he swallowed it back down. "You're really about to let us end up on the street," Brianna said, voice cracking on cue. "No," I said. "I'm about to show you exactly what's actually available to you, but not like this, not by breaking in." I turned and walked away before either of them could see how much my hands were shaking. I called a family meeting for that Sunday. Everyone came, expecting an apology. I brought directions instead. "I want to show you something," I told them in my parents' driveway. "Follow me." 40 minutes later, we pulled up outside a 4-bedroom brick house on a quiet cul-de-sac in Steel Creek, a porch with 2 rocking chairs, a lawn I mowed myself every other Saturday. I watched my mother's face in my rear-view mirror, watched the confusion bloom into something like dread. "Whose house is this?" she asked, as we all got out. "Mine," I said, pulling the deed out of a manila folder I'd been carrying since Friday. "Fully paid off in March, built it myself, financed it myself, over the last 3 years, while I kept paying rent on a studio you all thought was my whole life." Terrence went pale. Brianna's mouth opened and closed like she was recalculating a math problem in real time. "I don't understand," Mom said. "Why would you hide this from your own family?" "Because the last time I trusted this family with information about my money," I said, "you took out a loan in my name and handed my brother a car." "I learned my lesson, Mom. I just never told you I'd learned it." My father, standing off to the side, finally spoke. The first real sentence I'd heard from him in weeks. "Vanessa, she's right. We had no business doing that." Mom rounded on him, but for once he didn't back down. I turned to Brianna. "One more thing. Aunt Pam mentioned you had wine at Thanksgiving. 2 glasses, in fact. So before you say another word about needing this house for a baby, is there actually a baby, Brianna?" The silence that followed answered the question louder than any words could have. Brianna broke first, tears spilling out, real ones this time, not performance tears. "There's no baby," she admitted, voice small. "I thought if I said it, your mom would push harder. I didn't think it would go this far." Terrence stared at her like he was seeing a stranger. "You lied? To my whole family?" "You lied to me about the crypto," she shot back. "I was just trying to survive the mess you made." It unraveled fast after that. The $11,000 gone to a scam, the eviction, months of hidden bank statements, a marriage built on secrets, stacked on top of my mother's favoritism, like a house with no foundation. Mom tried, one more time, to turn it back toward me. "This doesn't change that you hid a whole house from us, Deja." "No," I said. "It changes that you decided, without asking me a single question, that my life belonged to whoever you liked better that week. It's always been Terrence, since we were kids." I just finally stopped waiting for that to change. Grandma Odessa, who'd been quiet the whole drive, walked up the porch steps slowly and put her hand on the railing like she was testing whether it was real. "Baby, this is beautiful," she said to me, ignoring my mother entirely. "You did this by yourself?" "Every bit of it," I said. "Then it's the smartest thing anybody in this family's done in 20 years, Grandma said, loud enough for Vanessa to hear every word. My mother didn't apologize that day. She still hasn't, fully. Some people would rather lose a relationship than admit they built their love on a scale that was never balanced to begin with. But Terrence and Brianna moved into a small 1-bedroom across town 2 weeks later, on their own. No help from me, and no help from Mom, who suddenly discovered she didn't have room either. It's been 8 months since that Sunday in the driveway. I still talk to my father, who calls more now than he ever did before, usually just to ask how the garden's coming along in the backyard. I talked to Aunt Pam every week and Grandma Odessa every Sunday, and I hosted my first Thanksgiving this year. My table, my rules, my rocking chairs on the porch for anyone who needed air. My mother wasn't on the guest list. That's not bitterness. That's a boundary, and I finally know the difference. Terrence and I are rebuilding something smaller and more honest than what we had before. No more assumptions, no more spare keys, no more family comes first used as a leash. Brianna and I don't speak much, and I've made peace with that too. I still think about that Thanksgiving sometimes, the one where my mother handed me a plate of collard greens in one hand and tried to hand my whole life away with the other. I think about how close I came to just packing my things, the way I'd been packing my feelings away for 32 years, because it was easier than making anyone uncomfortable. I didn't pack anything that week. I unpacked something instead. Every year of being told my needs came second. Every dollar I quietly saved because I'd learned the hard way that safety wasn't something my family was going to hand me. If you're watching this and you've got a family member who thinks your boundaries are optional, your success is community property, or your no is just a suggestion, I want you to hear this the way I finally heard it myself. You are allowed to build something they don't get a key to, and when they finally see it, standing in your driveway with their mouths hanging open, that's not spite. That's just what happens when you stop waiting for permission to protect your own life. I hope this story stayed with you long after the ending. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe for more amazing stories, and share your own ending in the comments. I can't wait to read what you come up with. See you next time.